Habakkuk. Well, the thing about Habakkuk, it's kind of interesting, especially in the time of the period that we live in, because everybody's worried about COVID, everybody's worried about D variant, everybody's worried about the oppressive governments that seem to be rising up and telling us everything what to do. Inflation's probably going to start kicking in, massive confusion. Oh yeah, there's fires out west and people are dying, and there's been an earthquake, there's climate change, the other thing, and then there's gender change. And I was trying to think, if I could find climate change, gender change, government change, you could find all of those. People are living on, before the world was kind of running on this thing called sex, and sex was selling, and it kind of seemed to be the number one product in the world. But today the number one product is fear, and everybody is being bombarded with, if it's not one thing, it's another thing, and it's fear, because you're seeing the whole society seemingly to collapse, right? And it doesn't make sense, and you're just wondering where God is. And people will say, well, how can you believe in a God when all of this stuff is happening? Welcome to Habakkuk, because that's his problem. Now, some people say Habakkuk is the questioning prophet. Well, he's going to ask some questions, but the beautiful thing about Habakkuk, his name means to embrace. And the thing is, he's got all these problems at the front that he's asking God about, but when God gives him the answer, he embraces the answer, and he doesn't worry about all those questions. And so the beautiful thing about Habakkuk is, where is it? Romans chapter 15, verse 4 is the kickoff to this thing. And Romans 15 says, whatever was written in earlier times was written for our instruction, so that through perseverance and encouragement of the scriptures, we might have hope. So you go to the Old Testament and you see what they struggled with, and you see how they got through it, and you see how God delivered them. And so you can say, I can put my faith in God who takes care of his people back then. He's the same God today. So that's where I need to stay focused. Habakkuk was made for this day and age right now, for the times, I believe. He that embraces, and you need to embrace the message coming out of here. Because look at Habakkuk, verse 2. And I might read the whole book of Habakkuk. Why? Because it's so short. How long, O Lord, will I call for help, and you will not hear? I cry out to you violence, and you do not save. Why do you make me see iniquity and cause me to look on wickedness? Yes, destruction and violence are before me. Strife exists, contention arises. Therefore the law is ignored, justice is never upheld. The wicked surround the righteous, therefore justice comes out perverted. And he is talking about the Jewish nation. The Jewish nation in 612 has got so bad, so ugly. And here's the thing. When we look at the way the world's going now, it's because we've walked away from God. Canada is no longer a Christian nation. Less than 20% of Canadians will attend a church. You have to be 20% plus. I think the States is about 22% plus that claim to belong to a church. And if you're talking about true religion, true Christianity, it's like 1%, right? But at least in the States, at least there's 22 plus that believe. And so it's shaky, it's hanging on, it's starting to collapse. But in Canada, right? When you don't believe in God, if you don't believe in God, you can't have a democracy, because people who believe in God believe that we can help other people, and somebody else can get ahead of me. I'll wait till next election. But in this day and age, if you don't believe in God, you're the number one. That's what Habakkuk is seeing all around him. It's all this sinful behavior. So why am I suffering with this? And so why are we going through this? Well, it's because we've walked away from God. We haven't, but the world has. And so you need to understand, if the society is going to leave God, the society is going to reap the benefits, the disasters. But here comes God, verse 5. Look among the nations, observe, be astonished, wonder, because I am doing something in your day you would not believe if you were told. And I'm going to tell you, Habakkuk, but God's got to clean up for the sake of Christ, who's going to come into the world. He's got to set the Jews straight. How is he going to do that? He's going to raise up the Babylonians. He raised up the Assyrians. They came in and took out the 10 northern tribes because they were too much of a danger of temple worship. They went into idolatry. So God says, I'll give you guys 100 years. Syrians are going to take you out. And they did. He raises up the Babylonians to take out the Assyrians. And now the Babylonians are going to come in and he's going to take away Judah totally. Boom. They're going to Babylon for what? 70 years. I'm going to bring you back. But you need this 70-year period to get off the land, to get out of your idolatrous thinking, because they even turned the temple into idolatry. They were looking at it that way. And he wants them to what? Get back to the word. So 70 years in captivity, they got back into the word. They start studying the word. And they started the synagogues. And that's when a revival will happen in any nation, is when people get so sick of the foolishness that they dive back into the word, and revivals take place when people are willing to quit with the denominations and all of that and just say, what does the word of God say? Let's look at the truth. That's when God can work with the people, when they're praying out to him. And so he had to do this. And that's what he's saying to Habakkuk. It's not me. I can't stop this stuff. You guys are just totally out, but I will with the Babylonians. Verse 6, I'm raising up the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, that fierce, impetuous people who march through the earth to seize dwelling places which are not theirs. They are dreaded and feared. Their justice and authority originate with themselves. So guess what? I'm bringing these guys upon you. Verse 9, all of them come for violence. Their horde of faces moves forward. They collect captives like sand. They mock at kings. Rulers are a laughing matter to them. They laugh at every fortress, heap up rubble to capture it. Then they will sweep through like the wind and pass on. I don't know. Is God going to give us Russia, going to give us China? That stuff I don't worry about. I think we're going to hit a disaster, and I think it's just going to be self-inflicted pain. But whatever it is, whatever God allows this world to do to us, and we're going to hit rock bottom possibly. I've always said that when you look at North America and you look at Europe, and as Christianity drops down, the reason being is because we got rich. And when we got rich, everything is our possessions. Our homes are our castles, and we don't worry about anything. Why do I need a God? It was in 2011. What happened? The Twin Towers come down, and everybody goes back to church for 6 months in New York City. And then, oh, well, I guess it's not the end of the world. And everybody quit going to church and they got back into their foolishness. Was that a nice little warning for people to start thinking about God? And now, we don't know. But when we have the problems, the place to turn is to God. Because look at the end of verse 11. Talking about the Babylonians, they will be held guilty. They whose strength is their God. If God is not your God, you're held guilty. You're on a hurt. You need to get back to God. So God's going to allow the Babylonians to come through, but he's going to deal with them. But he needs them to come through to deal with Judah because they are so wicked. Something needs to happen to wake them up. So North America, in our prosperity, have no need for God. So what does God say? Hey, well, maybe I should take away your prosperity. And when he does, are people going to start now turning to God? And if they do, are we ready to teach them? Because I think James was written to say, James is one of the first of the two of the books of the New Testament. I think Matthew and James were probably written right up front, more to the Jews, because James was written to the Jews, the Jewish churches, right? And he wants them to get along with one another because the Jews weren't getting along with one another. And he's saying, if you guys don't learn to get along, Paul's coming in with about 50 Gentiles. And if you guys hate each other, what are you going to do with the dogs when Paul brings them in? Like you guys. And the church in where? Asia. The 7 churches of Asia. Jesus says, you better clean up your act. 5 of them were messed up. 2 were pretty good, but he says, you better clean up your act. Why? Because the Romans are coming down the road. And if you don't have your act together, when the Romans come, you're toast. If you only believe in God when it's the good times, are you going to believe in him when it's the bad times? And if you don't believe him when it's the good times, can you believe him when the bad times? Or you be like Habakkuk and start complaining and saying, why are you letting this happen to us? Look at this next question. Are you not from everlasting, O Lord, my God, my Holy One? We will not die. We know that you're going to keep us all the way through here. You, O Lord, have appointed them to judge. And I'd almost say there should be a question mark there. You've appointed the Babylonians to judge us, and you, O Rock, have established them to correct us. Your eyes are too pure to approve evil, and you can look on wickedness with favor. Why do you look with favor on those who deal treacherously? Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than they? Oh, the Jews in their insanity are more righteous than the Babylonians? Both are. How can you be more righteous if you're both locked into wickedness? Oh, we're more righteous than their wickedness, and that's what he's asking God. Why have you made men like fish of the sea, creeping things without rulers over them? The Chaldeans bring all of them with a hook, drag them away with their net, gather them together in a fishing net. Therefore, they offer sacrifice to their net and burn incense to their fishing net, because these things, their catch is large and their food is plentiful. Will they therefore empty their net and continually slay nations without sparing? Are the Babylonians going to go on through the rest of the world doing what they're doing? If you look at the history of the world, nations usually last about 200 years and then they collapse. They just get rich and arrogant and they just collapse upon themselves. God knows what's going on. And right now, you guys need the Chaldeans because you guys are so messed up. You need a little bit of suffering. Oh, what was it? I didn't look it up, but I think it's Tammy Wynette, who's a famous country singer for those people that don't know about Tammy. And her song just popped to me when I was doing this. She says, I beg your pardon. I never promised you a rose garden. But everybody thinks God's promise is a rose garden. God gives us life. He doesn't care. I don't mean to sound cruel. He doesn't care about your personal satisfaction, right? He doesn't care that you've got a nice bed and you're all comfy and tucked in. He doesn't care about that. He cares about the nation. And he cares about the word getting out. And you can have an abundant life if you put the word into practice. But he never promised a rose garden, and everybody thinks, oh, God's so mean. Well, look what you're doing to yours. I guess because I'm old, but if I go back to the 60s, actually, if I go back to my dad's age in the 40s, I was just visiting Ma. Ma's 96, and Ma pulls out all this music, all these CDs, and there's just so much of it. And then she said, oh, didn't you know your dad was the disc jockey at all the Canadian gatherings down in Florida, because they retired when they lived in Florida, they would have dances. And my dad was the disc jockey. And I thought, well, that's crazy, because I never thought that. And I'm just going through all this music, right? And how I got onto that, I do not know. So but I was going someplace with that. But it was funny. And it's not funny anymore. Okay, so too little sleep hanging out at Ma's with the music. Oh, I know where I was going, because the music of the 40s was really nice. I like swing music. I like the big bands, right? And talking to Jean, Janet's husband, Jean would say, because he played saxophone, and Jean was playing at all the clubs. And when he played at the club, he would have a suit playing sax. And all the people that came, because I always thought it was just Hollywood, but all the people that were in the bar were all just hanging there, right? They all had tables with white cloth. Ladies were in full-length dresses. The guys were in their suits. they would get up and they would dance, really nice dance, right? Bar scene today is just, it's ugly and it's nasty. But back then it had some sort of respect. And so you track the music and you watch how much it starts going downhill. And you go, well, you can see what's happening to the nation because the music and the lyrics just drag us into the muck and the mire. And it's sad, but not to say that it's this generation that has destroyed us. No, it's been coming for like 50, 60 years. It's been coming. And you look at the 60s TV and you look at today's TV and you can see how it's been in every field, just about it. You can see it coming. And it's because we gave up moral standards a little at a time, little at a time. And we as the church, we cannot do that. So will they continue in this? So here he is, right? I'm going to stand my guard on my guard post, says Habakkuk, station myself at the rampart. I will keep watch to see what God will speak to me and how I may reply when I am reproved, because I know God's going to blast me for this question. And the Lord said, record the vision, inscribe it on tablets, that the one who reads it may run, for the vision is not yet for the appointed time, because that was 6:12. It doesn't happen until 6:06. So he's got 6 years. It hastens towards the goal. It will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it, for it will certainly come, and I will not delay. That's what God says. And that's what Jesus says to us today, doesn't it? This is for them back then. But what about us today? There's this thing called Judgment Day coming. And he's not really keen on bringing it on right now. So we're going to see an awful lot of craziness happening. But what am I looking for? Something like 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9. The Lord is not slow about his promise, as some count slowness, but his patience towards you, not wishing for any to perish, but to all to come to repentance. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with the roar, the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burnt up. Since all these things are to be destroyed in this way, what sort of people ought you to be? In holy conduct and in godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of the Lord, because of which the heavens will be destroyed. Get your act together, stay focused. It's coming. It may not come in your lifetime, but it's coming. Habakkuk, you got to hang in there. It comes in Habakkuk's time, the Babylonians. But for us today, God's taking his time. Why? Because he wants more people to be saved. That's why he's slowing down. And so we have to live among the muck and the mire. We're like Lot, who lives in Sodom, who every day had his soul tormented. If you watch anything, you get tormented. You listen with a critical ear, or critical eye, and you just go, whoa, how can I watch this? And here's those people. Here's the Babylonians. Behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not right within him. But the righteous will live by his faith. That's who we are. That's Romans chapter 1, verse 17. That's where Paul's quoting it from. The righteous shall live by faith. Furthermore, wine betrays the arrogant, the haughty, so that he doesn't stay at home. He enlarges his appetite like Sheol. He is like death, never satisfied. He also gathers himself to all the nations, collects to himself all peoples. It's kind of interesting, right? He doesn't stay at home because what are they doing with the family today? The family's being destroyed. No, wives, husbands, you both need to get a job, right? And pack the kids off. And the family unit is null and void in the society's eyes. Not in the churches, but in the society's eyes. Will not all of these take up a taunt against him? Even mockery and insinuations against the Babylonians, saying, woe to him who increases what is not his. For how long will he make himself rich with loans? How long will he make himself by stealing from others? Will not your creditors rise up suddenly, and those who collect from you awaken? Indeed, you will become plunder for them. All the great nations oppressed the people rose up, destroyed the nations. From the Assyrians, the Babylonians, especially Rome, it collapsed upon itself, and all the people that it oppressed devoured it. Because you have looted many nations, all the remainders of the people will loot you, because of human bloodshed and violence done to the land, to the town. God will punish them for what they've done, but he will allow it to happen. That's an interesting point. And you need to think about this. People turn to God when they're in disaster, not when they're in wealth. So when you see the country collapsing, maybe it's a good thing. Well, not for me. No. But what about your neighbor? Because you do have a love for your neighbor. And if you have a love for your neighbor, you're preparing yourself to teach them. Because there's coming a day when they're going to be so, and they're going to say, where's that? 1 Peter chapter 3:15, you know? Why do you have such hope? Why do you have such hope? We're paying $2 for a liter of gas. We will be by the end of this winter. You watch, we'll be paying $2 for a liter of gas. All those guys that drive those big trucks, they're going to be crying. Taxed to death. But that's okay. It makes us smile because it makes people start to think about what's my future. And when they start to think that way, verse 12, woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and founds a town with violence. Is it not indeed from the Lord of hosts? Now, this is kind of interesting. Is it not indeed, verse 13 of chapter 2, that people toil for fire and nations grow weary for nothing? Matthew 16:24, people toil for fire. All you're doing is working for is the fires of hell, right? And the nations are what? They're, where was that? Nations grow weary for nothing. Because what's your nation trying to do? Are you trying to build a godly nation? Jesus says in 24 of Matthew 16, if anyone wishes to come after me, deny himself, take his cross, follow me. Whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What will a man profit if he gains the whole world? I mean, great, you've got the 2-car garage, it's full, you got the motorcycle, you got the boat, you got the cottage, you got everything. But what will you give in exchange for your soul? The Son of Man is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels and will then repay every man according to his deeds. Yeah. People's toil for fire. If you're not toiling for God, you're wasting your time. And look at 14. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as waters cover the sea. That's direct. That's Christianity right there. And that's Colossians chapter 1, verse 6, as Jeff pointed out to me, because I believed it was verse 23. But then, of course, it could be both. Because in verse 6 of Colossians 1, it says, the gospel has come to you just as it has in all the world, as it is constantly bearing fruit and increasing, and it has been doing so also since the day you heard it. But verse 23 says, indeed, if you continue in the faith, firmly established, steadfast, and not moved away from the hope of the gospel that you have heard, that which was proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, was made a minister. The word's gone out in Paul's time. The knowledge of the glory of the Lord, the earth was filled. And woe to you who do not follow Jesus' greatest commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and your neighbor as yourself. Woe to you who make your neighbors drink, who mix in your venom, even to make them drunk so as to look on their nakedness. You will be filled with disgrace rather than honor. Now you yourselves drink and expose your own nakedness. The cup of the Lord's right hand will come upon you, come around to you, and utter disgrace will come upon your glory. We're not so much into the drinking as we're into smoking and drugs today. Oh, but let's legalize it. Sounds like a really wonderful plan. Let's just destroy the youth before they get into their adulthood. Let's just sell them marijuana. Like, hey, who cares? Obviously, the government, they just turn a blind eye. If we can tax it, we will legalize it. You know, woe to you who make your neighbors drink. We didn't force them. No, but you made it available. I'm not trying to come down on the government or anything. I'm just saying, when you look at the things that are going on in this world, things are collapsing. We're drifting away from immorality, and the new teaching is, we're drifting away from morality. The new teaching is immorality. 18 and 19 is really good because I believe this applies to all religions of that period in time, all religions, because they were all into idolatry. And think about the people today. Where do they get their answers from? What profit is the idol when its maker has carved it, or an image of a teacher of falsehood? Its maker trusts in his own handiwork. When he fashions speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a piece of wood, awake, to a mute stone, arise. That is your teacher? Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, and there's no breath at all inside it. All worldly religions, there's no life. We have a God that speaks to us from the Old Testament into the New Testament, wants to spend eternity with us. There's no breath in any of these. We have an incredible God. So therefore, circle 20. Habakkuk 2:20, underline, highlight. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. Just pray he doesn't show up real quick, because when he shows up, that's going to be called Judgment Day. That's one of my favorite verses, Hebrews 12:22. You have come to Mount Zion, city of the living God, heavenly Jerusalem, myriads of angels, church of the firstborn. That's where we are right now in the presence of God. When we come together collectively in worship, we enter in, we do communion with God. When you privately go to God in prayer, you enter into the throne room of God, because the blood of Christ allows you to draw near to the throne of grace to receive mercy. We are so incredibly blessed. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent. Habakkuk, don't worry, don't get so, because God's in control. And then the prayer here, Lord, I've heard the report about you and I fear, oh Lord, revive your work in the midst of the years. In wrath, remember mercy. Verse 3 is interesting because it says, God comes from Timon and the Holy One from Mount Paran. His splendor covers the heavens and earth is full of his grace. And I didn't understand that, but Timon is Edom. And Edom is Esau and Jacob, right? So they're the two opposites. And what it sounds like is the Babylonians have already done its damage in Edom, and now they're coming. And that's the picture I have here. And it matches Isaiah. If you just drop back to Isaiah 63, Isaiah 63 is really crazy. Who is this that comes from Edom? Verse 1, with garments of glowing colors from Basra, the one who is majestic in his apparel, marching in the greatness of his strength. It is I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Why is your apparel red and your garments like the one who treads the winepress? I have trodden the wine trough alone. And from the peoples there was no man with me. I also trod them in my anger and trampled them in my wrath, and their lifeblood was sprinkled on my garments, and I stained all my raiment, for the day of my vengeance was in my heart, and my year of redemption has come. I looked, there was no one to help, and I was astonished that there was no one to uphold. So my own arm brought salvation to me, and my wrath upheld me, and I trod down the peoples in my anger, and made them drunk in my wrath, and I poured out their lifeblood on the earth. God gives us the freedom to choose whatever we want to do, but guess what? We will pay the price. And there is a day of judgment. There is a day of calling. Don't worry about what you see going on. Christ is coming. And I'm running out of time. Oh, I got to hit verse 6. He stood and surveyed. The Lord came, stood, surveyed the earth, and he looked and startled the nations because they knew he has shown up, right? Yet the perpetual mountains were shattered. Now you have to understand, mountains are the governments. Everybody thinks the governments are this nation is going to last forever. This nation is going to last forever. Guess what? Governments fall. And that when God shows up, the governments fall, and the ancient hills collapsed. That was idolatry. That was the religion of the time, because the ancient hills is where they went up to the high places to worship. When God shows up, everything else disappears. And that's what he did with the Babylonians, right? And I am not going to finish this because you're going to finish this. But look at 13. You went forth for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. You struck the head of the house of the evil, and to lay him open from thigh to neck and from thigh to neck. For the salvation of your anointed. The word anointed means Christ, or it means Messiah, depends on what language you're talking. For the salvation of your people. If God would have let Judah continue on in their insanity, Christ would have nothing to come to and wouldn't have been established. He had to allow the Babylonians to come in. God has to allow a wicked, evil nation to fall. How is it going to fall? We don't know. Self-implode like the Romans? We don't know. But when you see things happening, don't be saying, oh God, why did you do this? Why are you letting this happen? He's letting it happen because people are demanding it to happen, and they're going to do it to themselves. So I don't blame God for any of it. I just ask that we can learn the lesson before it's going to be too painful for too many. But there's going to be a lesson. So don't worry. Don't be saying, oh God, help me. You know? Verse 16. Here's the kicker of this. Try to finish by 12. I heard, and my inward parts trembled. At the sound, my lips quivered. Decay enters my bones, and in my place I tremble, because I must wait quietly for the day of distress, for the people to arise who will invade us. Habakkuk saying, okay, it's coming. And I've just got to endure this thing, and we're not going to change it, right? Though the fig tree should not blossom, there be no fruit of the vines, the yield of the olive should not fail, and should fail, and the fields produce no food, though the flock should be cut off from the fold, and there be no cattle in the stalls. There is nothing benefiting this country. Everything has gone. Yet I will exult in the Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. The Lord is my strength. He's made my feet like hinds feet. He makes me walk on my high places. Okay, Lord, see, and this here at the end, 18 and 19, circle that. That's the embrace. Because at the beginning of this book, he's saying, how long, Lord? You're not listening to me. You don't say, he's crying all of this because of the disaster that his country is in. And God's saying, I'm going to take care of this. You're not going to like how it's going to happen to be taken care of, right? Because I didn't promise that rose garden. And Habakkuk's going, okay, even if all the food's gone, even if it's total disaster, you're still my Lord. You're still my God. And you're still my strength. That's how we need to look at God in this day and age. Don't be blaming him for anything that this world has brought upon itself. Get strong, get focused, and just hang in there, because there is a judgment day coming. And all we can do is reach out to help whatever few we have that opportunity to influence. We're not going to convert the whole world for Christ. Maybe he can with whatever disaster he brings. We can't, but we can help our neighbor, love our neighbor as ourselves. And that's encouragement. That's the kindness that I see of Habakkuk. Learn to embrace, accept the things that are going on, but always remember you're in God's hands. And that's the beauty that we need to hang on to. That's Habakkuk. Thank you.